Welcome. This is Debra Ann Clement, and thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Shortcut to the Soul. Before I jump into today's topic, I want to just announce that on Sunday, October 6th, I am having a live webinar. It's going to be 90 minutes long, and it's going to be a live lecture, and then it's going to be followed by a live Q&A. So for those of you who attend, you'll be able to ask me questions, and hey, I'll be able to answer them for you live. There will be more details, of course, the information. It's coming out later this week, and if you're interested in attending, if you're on my newsletter, if you're on my mailing list, no problem. You will get the announcement. If you're not, head over to debraclementastrologer.com, click on the freebie button, click on the newsletter, sign up, and you'll get the announcement. So now let's move on to today's topic, which is an introduction to intercepted horoscopes. So a lot of you, many of you have asked me to do something on this topic, and I have to be honest, some topics work better when you have visuals, to accompany them. I think this is definitely one of them, but we are going to give it a go. So for those of you who are new to astrology, or maybe you've never heard or have seen an intercepted horoscope, I just want to talk about, first of all, what it is. And to be honest, if all you've ever worked with or the only charts you've ever seen are charts that use the whole sign or equal house systems, well, then you probably never saw an intercepted horoscope because they don't occur when you use an equal house or the whole house system. So, an intercepted horoscope. Let's talk about how you recognize it. First tip off, well, when you look at that wheel, and you look around the outside of the wheel, and usually 12 houses, 12 different signs, you will notice that the same zodiac sign will appear on 2 consecutive houses. It could be any combination. It could be house 12 and house 1 and house 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4. You get the picture. Now, houses work in pairs, so if you look across the wheel, all right, and let's say it's houses 1 and 2 share the same sign, well, then houses 7 and 8 are going to share the same sign as well. Of course, it'll be the opposite sign. So, houses 1 and 2, for example, have Gemini on the cusp. Houses 7 and 8 will have Sagittarius on the cusp. So we have these duplicated signs, or call them duplicated houses. Now, think about this. If you have 2 sets of houses that share a sign, and again, we're going to go with Gemini on 1 and 2 and Sagittarius with 7 and 8. And we've got these, 12 signs and 12 houses. Well, there aren't going to be enough houses to go around because since Gemini and Sagittarius are each taking an extra house, right? There's a total of 4 houses. That leaves 8 houses, but yet there are 10 more signs. So, 2 signs are, kind of left out in the cold, so to speak. Where do they go? What happens to them? Well, they are intercepted. An intercepted sign means that all 30 degrees of the sign is contained within a single house. So, for example, let's say you're looking at this horoscope and you've noticed, wow, Gemini, it's on the first house. Gemini, it's on the second house. Cancer is on the third. Leo is on the fourth. Virgo is on the fifth. Libra is on the sixth. And Sagittarius is on the seventh. Oops, where's Scorpio? Well, you look, and Scorpio, all 30 degrees of Scorpio, is contained within house number 6. Houses operate in pairs. Look across the wheel, look at the 12th house, and all 30 degrees of Taurus will be intercepted in that house. Now, usually, the software, depends on the software that you use, the outer ring where the little glyphs, the symbols are, floating in the outer ring, okay, in the middle of the house would be the sign of Scorpio in the 6th, and the same thing in the 12th house. You would have Aries on the 12th house cusp. Symbol of Taurus would be in the middle of the house in the ring. It's how it works with my software. And then Gemini is on the first house. And those houses also, another thing that you'll notice is that they're much bigger. Because, hey, there's 30 degrees of a sign in there. Plus, let's be honest, Libra's on the cusp, a few degrees of Libra, and then Sagittarius is on the 7th, and unless, it's starting at 0, there's probably going to be a few degrees of Sagittarius at the end. So the houses are bigger. Now, as I say, it also depends. Let me just mention this for those of you who have, your own software, or depending on programs that you use. If the software creates houses and puts the houses equal size, that visually they appear to be equal, which makes it a lot easier to read. To be honest, that's what I do. I have my software set for that. It can be a little trickier to spot them if you're not familiar. But if you are using unequal houses, it will really jump out at you that there will be houses that really look tremendous, it seems, compared to others that look really skinny. So you've got this chart, right, with all these different size houses. And most of the time, there is just one set of duplicated signs, okay? Let's say Gemini and Sagittarius in this case, and one set of interceptions, intercepted signs. And here I'm going to say Scorpio and Taurus. The truth is, you can have more than one set. The closer, or let me put it this way, the further you are from the equator, the more likely there'll be these interceptions and duplications. I had one chart once that had two sets of them, and I have to tell you, it was crazy. So once you've identified, I've digressed a second, but once you've identified, so here are these houses with the intercepted signs. Well, the next thing you want to do is you do want to note, are there any planets in them? And if there are planets, they may or may not be intercepted. Now, it's possible there could be no planets in the house. There could be planets there and they are not intercepted. So how do you know if they're intercepted? It's really pretty simple, because they will be in the sign that is intercepted. So in this case, Libra is on the 6th house cusp. Scorpio is intercepted. 7th house is Sagittarius. There's a planet or two in Libra. It's cool. But let's say there's a planet Mars. Let's say it's Mars, and Mars is in Scorpio. Well, that Mars is intercepted, and that is significant. Intercepted planets, different views. Some people, astrologers, consider intercepted planets to be weak. I think they're frustrated. I really do. I think they're frustrated. I do agree with the theory that in some ways they kind of operate a little bit like 12th house planets, certainly in the sense that they need help, I'm going to say, expressing themselves, right? Because 12th house planets sort of we say, the hidden part of the zodiac, the closet of the zodiac, what have you. But they do need a little bit of help expressing themselves. And usually there's some type of a persistent issue or pattern in the person's life that is connected to the interception, to the house, to the sign, and if there are planets, to the planet. So what do interceptions do? Well, they certainly add layers of complexity. And these intercepted planets, because the entire sign is contained in a house, I used to think of it as like the planet's being held hostage because, think of it as the planet. You look to one side, in this case, let's say it's Scorpio, and Libra, right, is on the cusp leading into the 6th house, and then you look to the other side and there's Sagittarius, right in charge of the other house, and there's all the Scorpio, and it's kind of not in charge, right? The sign itself is not in charge of a house. Though I'm going to come back to that. But I do want to talk about the intercepted planets here for a moment. So, because I want to give you an example. So if the sun, let's say it's the sun that is intercepted, and for this purpose, I'm going to tell you I don't care what house it's intercepted in, all right? But as a general rule, if the sun is intercepted, okay, in the horoscope, think of the sun, it represents identity, right? Our self-expression. Very often the individual There's a lack of confidence. It could be difficult for them to get recognized in their lives. They may, especially when they were younger, they may have felt ignored. They may have felt, let's say, invisible. Another example, the moon. Again, I don't care what sign the moon is. I don't even care what the aspects are to these planets, but just in and of itself, when the moon is intercepted, the individuals, well, their experience, especially when they're younger, there may have been a lack of nurturing. There may have been a lack of sympathy or empathy for them. As they grow older, as they grow up, they may have difficulty expressing their emotions. There could be a very strong fear of rejection. Now, the sign they're in, the aspects they're in, the house, that all counts. But just for the purpose of the example, just the planet being intercepted has its own traits. And here's the thing. The planet is intercepted. And so for argument's sake, let's go with the sun and say the sun is intercepted. And let's pretend that the person has Leo rising. Well, the sun is intercepted, but it still is a chart ruler. It still rules that first house. And that interception is going to have a very strong influence on the person's approach to life. The other thing I want to mention, and this is talking about house rulership. So I'm going to go back to the example and say Libra is on the 6th house. So Venus rules the 6th house, right? Venus rules Libra. But then we've got Scorpio that loves to control, and there it is, all 30 degrees contained in the 6th house. So Scorpio is considered the co-ruler of the 6th house. Venus, okay, I'm going to say to you, Venus is the boss, but if you are looking at matters connected to the person's work, to the service, to the health, you're going to look at that ruler. You're going to look at Venus, and then you're going to look at Pluto. Okay, because Pluto rules Scorpio. And for some of you, you may also want to look at Mars, but the point is the intercepted sign becomes a co-ruler of the house that it's intercepted in. And of course, aspects always, right? Aspects always matter. But I'm going to take a step back and talk about the houses. So the interception, right, we've got the signs and they're in houses. So you have this pair, I want to give an example. So the houses that are intercepted, whatever the pair is, of course, that has a meaning. The signs have a meaning as well, and they have their own individual meanings. But it's also a question of putting it all together. So I'm going to give you one or two examples. So let me think of an example. Let's say the 3rd and 9th houses are intercepted. Okay? Now 3 and 9, they're both connected to education, to learning, to communications. And let us say the signs that are intercepted. Let's do Aries and Libra. Okay? So, if Aries is intercepted in the 3rd house, that means Pisces is on the cusp of the 3rd house. All right? So that Aries interception in the 3rd, one of the things it could mean is that the individual may need to take a little bit more of initiative, maybe with learning, or they need a little bit more, for lack of a better word, guts. They need to, when speaking their mind or standing up for what they believe in, for their own opinions. The other side of the chart, hey, Libra is intercepted in the 9th house. Now, that's also a house of knowledge, right, by all means. But if Libra is intercepted in the 9th, then Virgo is a sign, right, that's on the cusp of the 9th. So think about this. With Virgo being on the 9th, it's very analytical, can also be rather critical, but it's very sharp, it's very smart. And we're talking here, the 9th house is also a house, it's knowledge. It's also a house of, quite frankly, right, of tolerance. It's very open-minded. And so if Libra is intercepted in the 9th house, it may be that the individual, okay, in terms of the nature, needs to be a little bit more accommodating, quite frankly, and a little bit less, perhaps less demanding. Just quick examples there. A different example. Let's see. Let's go to the 2nd and the 8th, and let's just say houses 2 and 8 all right, are intercepted. Now, 2 and 8 have a lot of different meanings, but I'm going to focus on money because it's just an easier example to give. And this time I'm going to say that, let's say Libra, I'm going to still go with Aries and Libra, but I'm going to say that Libra is intercepted in the second house. So Virgo is on the cusp of house number 2. Libra is intercepted in it. Well, money. Let's talk about money. Virgo on the second house. Virgo is very much connected accounting, very practical. Virgo can also be very, self-sacrificing. And so having Libra intercepted, there could be a lesson or an issue where the person feels guilty even, or they need to learn to maybe enjoy their money, or maybe even just be a little bit self-indulgent, okay, within reason. And on the other side of the chart, well, we're talking about house number 8. So with house number 8, if Virgo is on the second, Pisces is ruling the 8th house, house of shared money, intimacy, trust. Aries is intercepted. So think about that. Shared resources, shared money, trusting other people. Pisces on the 8th house, well, it is very trusting. And so if you've got Aries intercepted, there may be a need there for some of this Aries energy of a little bit of not so much, gimme, me, mine, or anything like that, but looking out a little bit more for number 1 and not just saying, it's okay, hon, you take care of everything. So those are really very simple examples, but sometimes simple is better. Now, I do want to go back to a moment. I'm going to talk about those duplicated signs, because the truth is when I'm analyzing a chart, and I'll see the interceptions, but I actually do focus on those duplicated signs first. And I'm going to say to you, for purposes of this introduction, that I don't care what the sign happens to be. And it's actually not just for the introduction. This is actually true. I don't care what signs they are. Houses that are linked together by the same sign, okay, they are absolutely joined together. Now, the sign, of course, makes a difference when you're interpreting those houses. Absolutely. But if the first and second houses, that's the example I'm going to use, the first and second houses are sharing the same sign, okay? But that's going to tell you, first house, person's approach to life, right? How they approach life. And the second house is very much about self-esteem. Now, of course, it's about money. And so when you take that first house, the person, the self, the approach to life, and you connect it to the second house, earning money, they can, number one, that could be a sign right off the bat that this is someone who might actually have their own business someday. There are other things that would have to come into play. But certainly how much they earn, that could be important to them. That can sort of sometimes be how someone measures their success. The other side, though, is the second house is about values and principles. And that might be really super important to them. Now, you look on the other side, and 7 and 8 they're going to have duplicated signs as well. 7th house is relationship. 8th house, right? House of transformation. So very often when the 7th and 8th houses share the same sign, transformational experiences in one's life come through other people, life-changing experiences. It comes through relationships. And those relationships, it could be something very loving, like marriage. It could be something that is just relationships that don't work out and teach lessons, because we do have those. Or it actually could be something adversarial. It could even be something connected, to the courts or to litigation. But 7th house matters tend to be a catalyst for transformation. And so those linked houses, every single combination, first to second, all the way around the wheel to 12th to first, all have their own independent meanings. But again, you're still going to, interpret the sign on the cusp and the planetary ruler, just as you do with every, as if you had different signs on different houses. So when you look at it, there is a lot, right? There's a lot more. That's why I say there's more complexity. And this is really just skimming the meaning of it. And there are ways. So first of all, I was going to say, like, why do it? Right? You can use the equal house system or the whole whole house, and you don't have to deal with any of these interceptions. And it's a personal choice. Now, I learned this way. I have an intercepted chart, and I'll be frank, I used to gloss over it. I had no idea when I was first, learning astrology, like more than 25 years ago. But eventually over time, I did learn a little bit about it. And there's not a whole lot out there, but March and McEvers, The Only Way to Learn Astrology volume 2. It was the blue book, and they had some information in it, and that's where I started to learn a bit about it. And I do believe believing that the horoscope, the soul, right? There's the soul's plan, the soul's lessons, everything that's in there. And I just feel some of the souls, I joke about this and say, some of us are, overachievers, which sounds nicer than, some of us have come here to do maybe remedial work. But it does add the complexity. And the question is, does it work for you? And that's why if you have an intercepted chart, like I say, try it with a different chart. Try it with, equal house, and look at the chart and see if it reflects your life. For me, it reflects my life, and I know the work that I do. When I work with a lot of clients, I use Placidus, I have the interceptions, and it rings true. So I really just feel that we all work with the proper house systems that we are supposed to work with. It's just a question of what we connect with. But do I feel it's worthwhile? Absolutely. Now, when we're looking at this wheel, and so here's all these layers, and you can think of, okay, there's all these issues. There's the issues that come from whatever lessons, and I know I didn't go into those, just the houses, right? The houses being intercepted. And then there's the signs being intercepted. Oh, and goodness, what if there are planets, right? Well, how do you work through it, right? How do you work through it? And so there are ways that we do work, with these interceptions to help, especially if there are planets in them, to help them express themselves. And there's two things, and one goes to those duplicated houses and those duplicated signs, and that's why I wanted to discuss them a little earlier. Whatever the signs are that are duplicated, there is a meaning for them. But the houses that are connected together, as I mentioned, they have their own meaning. It is all connected. It just really is all connected. The point is that you would be looking at those duplicated houses, taking the meaning of them, and then looking at the planet that rules them both. Because the planets that rule the duplicated signs, and in the example with Gemini and Sagittarius, well, that would be Mercury and Jupiter. You would really pay close attention to those, to those planets, to the aspects in the planets, and also to transits to them. Now, transits and progressions, solar arc directions, they all help over time in terms of resolving the issues. But I'm going to tell you, what helps us break through, I'm going to say break through these interceptions and really express the planets the way they are supposed to be expressed. I think the most effective, honestly, are transits. I mean, I guess really I should say the most effective is, right, self-awareness and knowledge and taking action about it, and that's true. But we all need a little outside help sometimes, or a little outside influence, and those are the transits. Because I'm going to say to you that if you have an intercepted sun, all right, and it's hard to get recognized, or, a person feels ignored, let transiting Uranus come and conjunct that sun, or square that sun, even oppose that sun. And that's a nice lengthy transit, and that is going to help that individual, and help that sun really, I'm going to say, break out. So the transits to me are really are very important. And of course, the minor or the inner planet transits can be helpful as well. You've got to keep track of them, especially Mars. But Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, right, going out, are the main players, especially when we're talking, and you get into Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, you have these really lengthy transits. So I do think, I just want to see what else, I just want to, if I can convey anything else that's just not overly complicated. And because I'm sure that some of you are thinking, if you're still listening, oh my God, I never want to deal with this. I think equal house sounds absolutely great. And I can understand that. I really can. But I would say to you, by all means, to give it a try. And you can see what information's out there. Again, I do recommend March McEvers, because truthfully, it's like people say, how did you learn astrology? And so many of us self-studied, especially from, I guess, my generation. And those were not the only books, but that was the series of books that I sat down with and really learned. I learned relationship astrology. That I studied with someone. I studied with Patricia Weiss. She's a former president of the Long Island NCGR. We're still friends. Brilliant astrologer. And so, that's where I learned, but most of it was self-taught, and those books really took me a long way. And Robert Hand's transit book, which I just think if you work with transits, you've got to have Robert Hand's book. And so with the interpretations, quite frankly, it is a process, and the steps, like I say, I usually look at the signs, the houses first, and then I look into the intercepted houses signs, the planets. And it's not really always, it's really not in that exact order, because I just look at the chart. I'm doing the whole chart. But if you haven't worked with interceptions before, I'm just going to say to you that could be a good way to start. And see the information. As far as learning more about it, this is one thing that I'm going to say, is there going to be a course on it? Yeah, it's not coming till next year, because there's just so much to teach. There's just so much to teach. And my goal, if I'm going to teach about interceptions, and I really want to, because there's just not that much out there. And most of what I've learned from the experience of doing the charts, which is what I always say to everyone, right? You got to practice. And so that'll be next year. I will teach it live, for sure, because something will work so much better if there are visuals and to take people through the process of interpreting. So we'll see. So that is for next year. And that's going to just wrap it up for, I think I'm just going to leave it at that today. Again, it's just very basic, just some of the basic steps. And so until next time, I'm Debra Ann Clement, and may Jupiter's blessings be your constant companion.